Hello. This is another review of a literary classic called The Telltale Heart. I'm producing this as a work of commentary due to the fact that Valentine's is on its way. The Telltale Heart by Edgar and Poe. Now what I'm thinking is that Edgar Allan Poe, alright, he was sitting in one of his little spots, you know, with his favourite little bit of coffee, little bit of ethers, little bit opiates, and he started freaking out, right? He's on this trip, right? And then suddenly he hears his own heart, but really, like, he thinks it's like this heart is in the floorboards, and like he's like, oh, that'd be a great story. But like in the meanwhile, he's freaking out, right? I mean, he's like, oh my god. I mean, he's sitting over here, he sees, Percy Shelley's like, hey, yeah, fuck that. And then he's like, oh, Mary fuck, and then I guess sitting there like, oh god, maybe if I take some opiates I can get this story out. So right, he sits down after taking like boku opiates, and he's like, okay, let's come up with this like tale. And it's like, yeah, okay. So you murder someone, you put the heart in the floorboard, and essentially your guilt comes back and haunts you, and you hear it. Is what you first think when you read that story. You're like, this guy's guilt is the beating of the heart, right? But the thing is, when he wrote that, he's like, no, this story is actual literal. This heart is literally beating because he's on so many damn opiates. He was like actually thinking it's real life. So actually, where you think it's like a work of fiction, like a poetry fiction, but actually he wrote it, little known fact, as a actual non-fiction. And in fact, it's actually his life work as a biography. So might be different names, might be different supposed characters, but it was inspired by a true life story. And he was hanging out in, essentially the den of opiates, also known as back then U Town of Pleasure, or our opiate den. What would be a good name for the opiate den? Well, who knows? I've got to do some research on that little known fact. Little known facts are hard to research because they're little known. So by their very nature, I might not be able to figure out exactly where he did his opiates. But anyways, get back to that later. This is all just nonsense. Anyway, so also, while we're at it, Valentine's Day. Perhaps that actually played part in it. So maybe it was like near Valentine's Day. And Edgar Allan Poe, Edgar Allan Poe, poor Edgar Allan Poe. He's like, Percy Shelley, Mary Shelley, let me just barf all over myself because I'm Edgar Allan Poe. Like, I'm taking the darker side, the darker path of life, and here they are, like, writing Sheep's ABCs and all that nonsense, Whitworth, blah, 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 Jane Austen, blah, blah, and he's just, like, so sick of all these, like, heart people, and he's like, you know what, fuck the heart, let's just put that shit under the rest, under the ground, let's bury it, and then he's like, forgetting he has a heart. So maybe it's also representative of the heart he wishes to bury and longs to just divulge into the ground and just bury it, and he'll just live on. No heart needed. I mean, it worked for Dr. Seuss or whatever, the Grinch for a while, which maybe he took a trip to the future and figured this out. I don't know. Who knows exactly? These are all just speculation facts. I'm just letting you know. You might have thought this was all real until this very minute, but I'm actually just letting you know it's all rubbish. Anyways, so here's Poe. Like, all his contemporaries are, like, doing all this stuff with nature and all these blah, blah, blah political pieces, blah, 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 Frankenstein, blah, blah, blah. Just these, like, war pieces of people, like, dying, going away, and his lover comes out, she'll always be sad forever, blah blah, woe is me. It's like basically a fucking romance novel, and he's over here like writing like House of Usher, like, you know, Follow the House of Usher, like The Raven, Telltale Heart, is, you know, The Pendulum, you know, whatever, and he's just like this complete, you know, unique individual placed in this like shitty time where they're like, you know, not quite so serious about death. I mean, he's like, okay, well, I can kind of respect Emily Dickinson. I mean, she's got some merit. Stayed in bed all of life, didn't even get figured out till after her death, pretty much, just some solo sop in her bed, and she's wallowing in self-pity, and he's like, yeah, I probably could marry her, you know, she sounds awesome, you know, with that kind of repertoire behind her. Anyways, rest in peace, Emily Dickinson. Anyway, so he's just sitting over there and he's like, fuck Valentine's Day. Emily's busy, or she's dead at this point. I don't quite remember the history. We'll check up the dates later. She might have been 11. I know. Anyways, blah, blah, blah. So anyways, he's sitting in, he's like, I'm going to just like write this masterpiece about Valentine's Day. Because even though it might not have existed then, we're going to say it did for to fit into this whole like narrative that I'm making up, alright? So he goes and he's like, how could I represent Valentine's Day in the worst possible way? Well, let's like, what's the center of all romance? And like, you know, aside from actually committing murder of his contemporaries at that time, which he did in all respect, he decided, like, I'm just going to write this piece, and it's going to be about a heart. Yeah, something about a heart, because the heart's the center of love, and I want it just to go away. So anyways, haven't read it for a while, probably could be a little bit more accurate on the description if I had, but anyways, so history, let's see, history says that Edgar Allan Poe then wrote about the Telltale Heart, and he actually, like, was thinking that he could just, like, do a little inscription, like, maybe it's the heart. Maybe it's a specific heart of a person. Ever thought of that? Maybe it's specifically an ex-lover of his. You know, maybe it's specifically someone who pissed him off and was like, oh, fuck the joy. You know, I'm just sitting over here in my, essentially, like, gothic, start of gothic, like, black, high-collared, you know, like, practically robes, you know, and he's like, never smiling, like, fuck a smile. Why smile? I mean, life back then, I mean, you'd walking through shit. Yeah, I mean, people are like, look out below as they throw it. Well, a lot of good that might do when you say, look out below as the shit is literally falling from the sky. And you're just like, walking through shit. There's people are dying left and right. There's fucking the Black Plague. Probably not then, but at some point, people are just, they get a fucking cut and it gets infected and they die. You know, it's just miserable back then, not to mention the playhouses, and there's just like layers upon layers of like, you know, shitty acting and men playing women playing men. You know what I mean? It's just, not that that's a problem so much as they just weren't quite up to par in what Poe believed was possible. So anyways, instead of like exploring the rainbow in, you know, finding his joy, Poe just decided to go the exact opposite way of that. I mean, he perhaps was motivated by, I don't know, maybe, hey, maybe the guy only saw in black and white, was like, had someone buy his clothes for him. He's like, you know what? Maybe it was a sign of rebellion. He's like, since I can only see in black and white, I'm only gonna see that way, and I'm only gonna dress that way. And people picked up his clothes from him and just decided black and white. Anyways, I don't know. It's dreary, and you know what? Anyways, he's a dismal figure in history. I just loved him. I tell you, I just, you know, in college, I decided I'd write something about Poe, and the professor actually came up to me, set me aside, and was like, you realize you could write about anyone in history, like someone's doing Jim Morrison from The Doors, and he starts naming all these people he obviously thinks is cool, and I'm like, no, I want to do Edgar Allan Poe. Yeah, quite suicidal at that time. Anyways, just kidding. Anyways, just to get back to the point, yeah, so the Telltale Heart. Anyways, specific lover, non-specific, we don't know, man, woman, either way. Kills him off, buries him in the floor, in the wall, whatever, and then just keeps on going after him, and then he pretty much wails on himself and tells on himself. Gets himself in a lot of trouble. Maybe it's just like this fictional piece that's actually like what he wishes he could do to every ray of joyful sun that ever touched the earth. Anyways, I don't actually have a quite good story yet. This is all just ramblings, but I'll get back to this because if I actually put together some research on this, it could actually be quite fantastic. Anyways, wonderful notes. Talk to you later. Happy Valentine's Day 2016. Off, actually, have a miserable, in the spirit of Edgar Allan Poe. Love sting, love hurts so bad. Anyways, nothing like little Nazareth to get it going. Anyways, okay, have a great day. Oh wait, have a miserable day. Love, Opiate, Edgar Allan Poe.